The general prologue of the Canterbury Tales opens with a return of spring to England and the April showers that occur. Springtime is a crucial season in England as new energy begins to fill the people of England and stir their hearts for a pilgrimage. The awakening of the landscape with a desire to go on a pilgrimage mixes bodily lust with religious zeal. People from all over England begin to make their way to the Canterbury Cathedral, in which they seek the blessing of St. Thomas a Becket. Chaucer, who is the narrator of our story, is one of many who seeks to go on this pilgrimage. He arrives at Tabard Inn in Southwark. While staying at the Tabard Inn, he meets 29 other pilgrims who plan to take a trip to the Canterbury Cathedral as well. This group is full of diversity. The narrator decides that he would like to join this group on their pilgrimage. As the narrator eats and drinks with his fellow pilgrims, they decide that they shall leave for Canterbury tomorrow in the morning. The narrator takes a moment of pause and chooses to address his readers. He makes it known to the readers that he is the author of the story that is being told. He tells his readers that he is giving us his perception and judgments of those who are in the group that he is joining. The first character the narrator describes to his audience is the knight. The narrator describes the knight as someone who loves chivalry and fights for truth and honor. This knight has traveled all over, from Alexandria to Prussia to Russia to Lithuania to Granada to Morocco and to Turkey. This knight has fought many battles in these lands and has also come out as the victor. Yet he never accepts the praises of the people for his victories, but instead gives praise and glory to Christ. The knight is someone who is truly humble and is modest in all his activities. It is important to note that the narrator tends to make fun of many of the characters that he will describe, yet he is genuine in his remarks about the knight. The next character the narrator introduces is the squire. This squire is the son of the knight that was previously mentioned. The narrator describes the son as being lustful and full of energy. The squire has curly hair, is about average height, and extremely agile. The squire aims to impress his young maiden by wearing fancy clothes. He shows off his ability to sing, play the flute, joust, dance, draw, and write. He is consumed with love so much that he struggles to sleep at night, for he longs for the love of his maiden. The narrator points out that the squire is not as noble as his father and is vain in his youth. The narrator does comment that even though he may be vain, he displays all the skills necessary to be a courtly lover, and he also acts within his social position. The knight has one servant, and that is the yeoman. The yeoman wears a green hood and coat. He carries a bow, arrows, and a dagger in which he keeps well kept. The next character the narrator introduces is the prioress, a nun named Madame Elgantine. She thinks she sings the liturgy well, but in reality, she sounds awful. She speaks French in an English accent. She has very good manners and does not like intimate courtly manners. The narrator makes fun of her, calling her a wimp every time she sees a dead mouse. He also makes fun of her so-called compassion for her dogs as well. The narrator points out that she pretends to be dainty, but in reality, she cares more for herself and her earthly possessions than she does for Christ. She travels with a second nun, a chaplain, and 3 other priests as well. These characters do not get any description from the narrator, but they do get a chance to tell a story later on. Next is the monk. This is no ordinary monk, but according to the narrator, the monk is of the Benedictine order. However, he has let the old ideas of the Benedictine order pass and instead has embraced new ideas. He chooses to go hunting instead of spending time in the scriptures. He wears expensive clothes instead of dressing modestly. The narrator does comment that although he is handsome, he is also plump and bald, and he looks as if he pours oil on his head daily. The narrator shows that this monk acts more like a lord than a monk who is devoted to the scriptures. The next character the narrator describes is the friar, whose name is Hubert. Medieval friars were mendicants. They took a vow of poverty, were not allowed to work, and had to depend on the charity of others for their livelihood. This friar was very popular among the rich men and women in his town. He would ignore the poor, which are those he is supposed to help, and instead help the rich. As a friar, he has the power to absolve any sin for a certain price. The friar could sing very well, and he knew all the innkeepers and barmaids very well. He would absolve any sin and help anyone in which he would make a profit off them. He acts more like a pope than a normal clerk. He also has a lisp. The narrator comments that he is so hard of heart that he weeps when he receives his payment, and not for his sins or the sins of others. Also in the company of the narrator is the merchant. He has a forked beard and he wears nice clothing, a multicolored coat, fur hat, and boots to be exact. He is slow and careful with his words. The narrator sarcastically informs us that he is also good with money, that no one would know he's in debt. Next in the company is the clerk. The clerk is an Oxford University student who would rather buy books than the necessities, such as food or clothing. The clerk takes his study seriously, and whenever he speaks, it is full of moral virtue. Up next is the man of laws. The man of laws is a hard worker who attempts to move up through the social classes by his connections. He works harder than everyone else and pretends to be busier than them. He is highly sought after in the legal field, and he is an excellent buyer of land. The next fellow in the company is the franklin. His main goal is to find happiness and pleasure in life. Whatever brings forth these things, that is what he will do. He constantly offers food and drinks to men. No matter what the season, he has food to match it, and is always in abundance. The narrator tells us that there are also 5 guildsmen in the group as well. The 5 guildsmen are a haberdasher, a carpenter, a weaver, a dyer, and a tapestry maker. They all dress very well. Even though these guildsmen think they are important, the guildsmen only appear in the general prologue and do not tell their own story. The guildsmen also hire a cook, Roger de Ware, for the trip. The narrator says the cook is very skilled, yet he cannot stand him because of a pus-filled ulcer that is on his face. The next character the narrator introduces us to is the shipman. The shipman is not good at riding a horse because he is always out at sea. The shipman informs the narrator that while the merchant was asleep, he stole some of his goods. Although the shipman is supposed to be the protector of the goods that are being transported on his ship, he feels no reservations about stealing a little for himself. He also wears a dagger around his neck. The next character in the company is the physician. The narrator's description of him is neither entirely satirical nor entirely complimentary. The physician uses astronomy to diagnose every illness based on the 4 basic weather conditions: hot, cold, dry, and moist. He can quote all of the ancient medical texts, yet he knows very little of the Bible. He practices moderation in his diet, and he wears taffeta robes. He says that gold is the best medicine. According to the narrator, the physician loves learning and has a moderate lifestyle, but he pursues his career because of his love of gold and not for his love of knowledge. The next character we meet is the wife of Bath. The wife of Bath is bold and is not afraid to hold back what she knows. She has a bright red face that matches her stockings. She has a gap tooth, and she sits easily on her horse. She has had 5 husbands, and although she is no longer young and beautiful, she considers herself to be an expert in love and marriage. She has visited Jerusalem 3 times. She has also visited Rome, Cologne, and other holy sites that many pilgrims trek to. She is employed as a seamstress. The next character the narrator introduces is the parson. The parson is from a small town, and unlike the mincing prioress, the hunting monk, and the corrupt friar, the parson is described as someone who serves the Lord wholeheartedly. The parson is holy in thought and deed. He loves tithing the poor, and if necessary, he will cover their tithe for them. No rain or sickness will keep him from visiting his parishioners, and always aims to bring them closer to God's grace and mercy. The next character the narrator introduces is the plowman, who is the brother of the parson. The plowman is a faithful worker who worships God wholeheartedly and loves his neighbor as himself. The narrator assures the reader that he is almost done explaining who is in the group, and we only have a couple more people left. Those who are left in the group to explain are the reeve, a miller, a summoner, a pardoner, a manciple, and himself. The miller is a rough and indecent peasant who always wins prizes in wrestling, plays the bagpipes, steals corn, and is not like the daintier pilgrims in higher stations. His nose and mouth are huge, not to mention he has a hairy wart on his nose as well. He has a red beard and red hair. The miller is quite dumb and tells many sexual stories. The narrator says he has a thumb of gold. By this, the narrator is implying that he is not honest in his work. The manciple is a very clever businessman. A manciple is someone who serves the lawyers while the lawyers serve the people. The narrator gives the manciple much credit for his cleverness. Although the manciple is uneducated, he is so clever that the lawyers end up serving him instead of the other way around. The reeve is filled with great greed. He knows his lord's account book so well that no auditor can catch him, and all those who work for the lord, such as herdsmen, farm managers, and servants, fear him. He knows the tricks so well that instead of working for his master's gain, he uses these tricks to skim all he can without being caught. He even has more money than his master. He is a talented carpenter, and he always rides in the back of the group to gain more money and power. The narrator describes his appearance as a cleric man with a cropped beard and thin legs. The summoner is another character in Chaucer's tale that does not live up to their false conviction. The summoner's job is to call people before the church court to confess their sins and crimes, yet he can be bought off easily, for he cares more about his pleasures than the security of someone's soul. When the summoner is drunk, he speaks in Latin. His favorite food is garlic and onions. He is also the sole counselor for all the young women in his area. He has a disease that makes his face bright red and full of pimples that are full to the brim with pus. It causes him to have scaly skin and to have beard loss as well. The man disgusts the narrator from the inside out. Riding with the summoner is the pardoner. The pardoner rides from Rome with pockets full of pardons, veils, goblets, decorated crucifixes, as well as pig bones. He holds these in a glass reliquary and tells people that this bottle holds the bones of the holy saints. He flatters many with speech, although he doesn't mean it. However, the narrator does say that he is a good singer and storyteller. The narrator says he intentionally shows off his yellow thin hair, and he droops it over his shoulders in long, elaborate strands to impress others. His voice is as high as a goat. Scholars speculate that Chaucer's description of the partner is to point out that he's homosexual. The narrator pauses the action to apologize to the reader for anything inappropriate that will take place in the tales. He makes it clear that he is simply trying to report exactly what is being shared, and to report it in such a way that the reader can understand what is being said. He quotes Plato saying, "The word must be cousin to the deed." The narrator jumps into action again by going back to the first night he had with the pilgrims. The host put everyone in a great mood by serving a wonderful meal. Once everyone has paid their bill, the host rejoices because this is the happiest group he has had under his roof all year long. The host proposes to the company of pilgrims that instead of riding to Canterbury in complete silence, that they should all play a game that he has invented. He swears by his deceased father that they will all have a wonderful time. Everyone in the company accepts to play the game. Thrilled with their answer, the host begins to explain. The game is this. Each pilgrim will get a chance to share 2 stories on the way to Canterbury and 2 on the way back. The goal is to tell the best stories possible, and according to the host, it should have great significance and enjoyment. The host says he will travel with them and be the judge. Whoever the host declares the winner will have a free meal at the tavern that will be paid for by all the other pilgrims. If anyone argues with his decision, they will have to pay for everything on the journey. The pilgrims agree to his plan and ask him to be the governor, tale judger, and record keeper on the trip as well. It is interesting to note that the pilgrims are more than happy to treat the journey to Canterbury as one full of entertainment instead of pious religious expedition. The next morning, the host wakes them all up and gets them ready for the trip at hand. About a mile or 2 into the trip, the host reminds the company of their agreement. To see who goes first in tale-telling, they draw straws. The knight draws first and indubitably draws the short straw, and therefore it goes first. The knight readily accepts this challenge and begins his tale.